Welcome to everybody. The topic of tonight's shir relates to a very, very basic question of the way we behave on Yom Tov. It's well known, I think, to all of us that even though all malacha is prohibited on Shabbos, certain malachos are prohibited on Yom Tov, and we usually assume that malachos that are done for the purpose of making food are permitted. And the question is that really true? Or a better way of putting it, it's pretty clear that not all malachos for the purpose of making food on Yom Tov are in fact permitted. So by way of example, a somewhat well-known Gemara in the beginning of Maseches Beitza speaks about why you're not allowed to consume an egg that was laid by a chicken on Yom Tov. So one of the suggestions that's quoted in the Gemara in the name of Rabbi Yosef on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph is that you're not allowed, they made a gzeira, not to consume an egg that was laid by the chicken, because if you do that, you might consume a fruit that fell off the tree on Yom Tov, that fell off on its own. And why are you not allowed to consume a fruit that fell off the tree on Yom Tov? The answer is, gzeira shema yala v'yitlosh. If we allow you to consume the fruits that fell off on their own, you might come to pluck the fruit yourself. So the Rishonim ask a very basic question, which is, well, why are you not allowed to pluck the fruit? That's what we call Melechet Ochel Nefesh. It's for the purposes of consuming food. So clearly, even though we assume that we cook on Yom Tov, we do all sorts of things for preparing food, not everything is permitted. I wanted to begin with just one particular, it's one of my favorite tosusim, just because the image sticks in my head. As I just suggested, we are permitted to do malacha in many circumstances on Yom Tov to prepare food. But the Gemara actually has an extension of this category. Let me take for an uncontroversial example. Let's take the example of heating water to wash one's hand on Yom Tov. Now, washing one's hands on Yom Tov is not Melechet Ochel Nefesh. It's not it's not for the purposes of food. So why are we allowed to use the hot water at least to wash our hands, to wash our face? So the Gemara has a principle that once a malacha, the way most Rishonim understand, once a malacha is permitted to perform for the purposes of making food, let's say cooking, you're allowed to cook food, then you're allowed to perform that very same malacha for other needs of Yom Tov. So heating water involves bishul, so I'm allowed to cook meat, I'm allowed to cook all sorts of foods. Heating water is considered bishul also. So even though I want to heat the water to wash my hands, nonetheless, it's permitted because we say the principle of mitoch. Mitoch, since the malacha of bishul was permitted for the purposes of creating food, of making food edible, it's permitted for other uses on Yom Tov as well. So that's a basic principle. We permit malacha for the preparation of food, and we extend the malacha to other areas that are needs of Yom Tov that aren't actually related to food. So Tosfos in Shabbos asks the following question. The Gemara in Shabbos suggests, it's not 100% clear, that making cheese on Shabbos, taking the milk and putting some type of catalyst in, rennet of some kind, and causing the milk to turn into cheese, is considered a malacha of bona, of building. And Tosfos understands that this malacha is a Torah prohibition on Shabbos. Based upon that, Tosfos assumes that it should be permissible to make cheese on Yom Tov because it's litzorach ochel nefesh. So then Tosfos asks an amazing question. Tosfos says the following. It's the first source on the sheet. It's the last 4 lines, right after the ellipsis. Tosfos says, Umihu tema lari, kevan de mutter legabein biyom tov min haTorah, since you're allowed to make cheese, and afilu be'efshar, even if you could have made it from before. And Tosfos assumes that Melechet Ochel Nefesh, even if you could have done it from Erev Yom Tov, and it would have been just as good, you're allowed to do it on Yom Tov. So Tosfos says on the next line, Im kain nafal beiso b'Yom Tov. Let's say your house falls down on Yom Tov. So I can't imagine it's one of our houses, but imagine a one-room mud shack. It falls down on Yom Tov. You could rebuild your house on Yom Tov, assuming you could finish it on Yom Tov and use it. Why? Since you're allowed to do the malacha of boneh for the purposes of making cheese and making food, because it's have mishum boneh, k'da amar b'samach, then hutar nami shelo litzorach. Even for non-food purposes, you'd be allowed to do boneh on Yom Tov. You can imagine all sorts of things, but perhaps like putting my bookcase together might be considered boneh, or putting a shelf back in a certain ways. But somehow the building of the house is an amazing metaphor. My house falls down in Yom Tov. I can build it because mitoch that boneh was permitted for making cheese. Boneh is mutter for any other needs of Yom Tov. As long as I need my house on Yom Tov, it's a very sunny day, it's a very windy day, so I need to rebuild my house because and therefore it should be mutter because it's boneh. Now Tosas gives an answer here. He says v'yesh lomar the asur midrabanan to have the uvda dechol. So Tosas says, you know what? You're right. Minat Torah, you could rebuild your house. It's only an issa d'Rabbanan because it's kind of an uvda dechol. This answer feels a little weak. It's like, really, the only reason I'm not allowed to rebuild my house on Yom Tov that fell down, and if I can use it on Yom Tov, is because it's uvda dechol. But it's really, really mutter minat Torah. It's an amazing, amazing statement of Tosas. But really what I want to use this as the springboard to explore is, since it's clear there are many malachos, even for Ochel Nefesh, that the Mishnayos and the Gemara prohibit doing on Yom Tov, meaning not all malacha is permitted. The question is, what is the basis for this prohibition? Is this simply a gzeira midrabanan, a rabbinic prohibition, as Tosas suggests in this context of being boneh, or is there actually something more to this? So the exploration of this topic really begins by a very quick summary, a survey of the various psukim in the Torah that speak about the prohibition of malacha on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And it's actually, the truth is, the person who's responsible for this survey is the Ramban. The Ramban, who was astute in every single way, both as a biblical commentary and as a lamdan, it really b'chol kitzos haTorah. So the Ramban just pays careful attention to the psukim. So very, very, very quickly. So firstly, on Shabbos, I don't think I put the psukim here, but the Shabbos, on Shabbos, the Torah says in the Aseres HaDibros, lo saseh cho malacha. You may not do any malacha. Okay. Now, the first place we hear about malacha on Yom Tov is in Parshas HaChodesh and Parshas Bo, is the first pasuk on the Roman numeral 1. And the Torah says, Uvayom harishon mikra kodesh, uvayom hashvi mikra kodesh yelachem. The first and last days of Pesach are Yom Tov, the mikra kodesh. Kol malacha lo yaseh bahem. No malacha, or any malacha may not be done on them, but ach asher ye ochel l'chol nefesh, hu levado yaseh lachem. Except that which is done, ye ochel l'chol nefesh. It's done for feeding people. That may be done on Yom Tov. So on the one hand, the Torah says, by Pesach, it starts up by saying kol malacha, and then it qualifies it and says except ochel nefesh. So apparently kol malacha is an overarching category. It includes, let's say, any of the lamites malachos for any purpose. And then the Torah carves out an exception where there is ochel nefesh, where it's for the purpose of food. If you turn, I did quote one pasuk from Shabbos, from Parshas Mishpatim. The second pasuk, the Torah says, kol malacha lo sasu Shabbos ila Hashem b'chol moshe osechem. Okay. Now, when you, I'm sorry, from Parshas Emor. Now, continue there, still under the, under what Pasuk Vav in Perach Chaf Gimel. And there, when the Torah speaks about Pesach, so it says in Pasuk Zayin, Bayom HaRishon Mikra Kodesh, Yelachem, Kol Meleches Avodah Lo Sasu. It doesn't say on the first day of Pesach, and it repeats this on the 7th, it doesn't say you can't do any malacha. It says, Kol Meleches Avodah. What does Meleches Avodah mean? It means a work, a malacha of toil. Then the Torah repeats that on the 7th day of Pesach as well in Pasuk Ches. Then you go to the next section of Parshas Emor in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, speaking about Shavuos. Ukrasem be'etzem hayom hazeh mikra kodesh yelachem kol meleches avodah lo sasu again. And then you go to Pasuk Chaf Hei, and there the Torah speaks about Rosh Hashanah. Kol meleches avodah lo sasu b'kraftem mishal Hashem. The same thing. The Torah doesn't say you can't do any malacha on Rosh Hashanah. It says you can't do meleches avodah. Now we come to Yom Kippur. In Pasuk Chavches, the Torah says, "V'chol melacha lo sasu be'etzem hayom hazeh." Any malacha, the same formulation that's used by Shabbos, and it happens to be true. On Yom Kippur, there's no heter or melechas ochel nefesh, presumably because you're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. So why would the Torah permit you doing malacha for eating? Then you go to the parsha of Sukkos, Pasuk Lamed Hey and Lamed Vav for the first day of Sukkos for Shmini Atzeres. Once again, kol melechas avodah lo sasu. And then there's only one other pasuk, which is speaking about the last day of Pesach in Parshas Re'eh, which is the Kriyas Torah for the second day of Shavuos. The Torah says, "Sheishes yamim tochal matzos, uvayom hashvi'i atzeres l'Hashem Elokecha lo sa'aseh melacha." It doesn't say melechas avod kol melechas avodah, but it also doesn't say kol melacha. It just says lo sa'aseh melacha, but it doesn't specify which kind of melacha. So the question that the Ramban confronts is, what is the meaning of the term meleches avodah? That the Torah singles out on Yom Tov, where it doesn't say on Yom Tov, with the exception of the first day Pesach in Parshas Bo, the Torah never says you can't do kol melacha on Yom Tov. It says you can't do kol meleches avodah, and only in Parshas Bo, in Parshas HaChodesh, where the Torah says on the first day of Pesach, kol melacha lo yaseh bahem, it immediately qualifies the kol melacha by saying, but nefesh hu levado yaseh lochem. What does it mean, kol meleches avodah? So Rashi in Parshas Emor quotes some particular comment. He has an interpretation of meleches avodah, and the Ramban explains why he disagrees with it. But now, on the bottom of the sheet, on the first sheet, the Ramban in his Perush on Chumash says the following: Aval, after dismissing Rashi's interpretation, Aval, Perush meleches avodah means kol melacha she'ena litzorech ochel nefesh. The way I would formulate it is that, according to the Ramban, if we were to create an arithmetic equation, it would be the following: kol meleches avodah plus ochel nefesh equals kol melacha. It's kol melacha means any of the 39 melachos for any purpose. But that can be subdivided into two categories. Those melachos which are for the purposes of creating food for the moment, kol melacha, that's melechas ochel nefesh. That's what the Torah spells out in Parshas Bo, ach asher yachol ochel nefesh. And everything else is considered melechas avodah. On Shabbos and Yom Kippur, we'll read the Rambam, but on Shabbos and Yom Kippur, the Torah prohibits kol melacha. On Yom Tov, the Torah only prohibits kol meleches avodah. Only by the Parshas Bo, where the Torah starts out by saying kol melacha lo yaseh bahem, giving you the impression that on the first day of Pesach you can't do any melacha. It's just like Shabbos. It's just like Yom Kippur. That's why the Torah now has to qualify and say, oh, but by the way, ach asher ochel nefesh. I didn't really mean kol melacha minus ochel nefesh, which happens to equal kol meleches avodah. So the Ramban continues, K'inyan shenemar, sheishes yamim tavod vasisa kol melachtecha, uv'chol avodah basadeh, v'nevatem v'nizratem, v'kayin haya oved adama. So that's called meleches avodah, working the ground. The way you plow and you plant your fields and you harvest, the Ramban says, that's called meleches avodah. Umalacha shehi bi'ochel nefesh, he meleches hana'a is the term he uses, lo meleches avodah. You might say that meleches avodah doesn't have instant gratification. You do the malacha, but you don't benefit from it now. But meleches ochel nefesh is something that you benefit from it right now. V'zeh misboyer b'Torah, and the way the Torah explains this, ki b'chag hamatzos she'amar tchila kol, turn over the sheet, kol melacha lo yaseh bahem. When the Torah says you can't do any malacha in Parshas Bo, hutzrach lefarish, it had to explain ach asher ochel nefesh hu levado yaseh lochem. But uvishar kol yamim tovim yekatzer, by all of the yamim tovim, the Torah abbreviates v'yomar kol melechas avodah lo sasu lesar kol melacha she'inena ochel nefesh. It prohibits any malacha which is not for food. Ulahudia she'ochal nefesh mutar behem. And the Ramban says, "V'lo yomer akasuv la'olam be'echad mikol shayam tovim." By no other Yom Tov except for Yom Kippur does the Torah ever say kol malacha. V'lo yifarish b'hem heter ochal nefesh. It doesn't have to spell out ochal nefesh the way it did by Pesach the first time. ki meleches avodah yelamed al zeh. Okay, so that's what the Ramban says. Okay, so the Ramban here, in his Perush on Chumash, simply discriminates between what he calls a Meleches Ochel Nefesh and all other Melachos, which are Meleches Avodah. But what is interesting is the Ramban includes in that working the land. Now, it could be that the reason why he includes working the land is because, generally speaking, when you plant on Yom Tov, nothing's going to grow. In other words, it will grow, but it's not going to grow on Yom Tov, so you don't get any benefit on Yom Tov. At the end, the Ramban mentions, and he seems to be quoting Rabbeinu Hananel there, that Zriya, Kitzira are included as well. Now, Kitzira, you might or might not benefit on Yom Tov. It depends what you're harvesting. If I go to my backyard and I pluck an apple off the tree, I can eat it right then. But if I go to my backyard and I harvest wheat from the ground, guess what? I now have to bundle the wheat, I have to thresh it, I have to sift it, I have to do all sorts of things that I'm not likely to actually make bread on Yom Tov from that. So the Ramban in his Perush on Chumash simply distinguishes between Meleches Avodah and Meleches Ochel Nefesh, but he doesn't provide precise lines. But where does the problem begin? So the first Gemara I mentioned to you already under Roman numeral 2 is the Mishnah in Beitza, why you're not allowed to eat a Beitza Shenolda b'Yom Tov that was laid on Yom Tov, and I quoted the Gemara about the Gzeir Peres Hanoshrim. So that's one example. The Gemara clearly assumes I'm not allowed to pluck a fruit off the tree on Yom Tov, but the Gemara doesn't explain why. It just takes it as a given that there's a Gzeira Shema Yala b'Yitlosh. I might climb the tree and grab that juicy apple. Why is it prohibited to do? Gemara doesn't say. The opening Mishnah of the third Perek says that if you have a fish in a vivarium or an aquarium, as we would call it, you're not allowed to be tzad dagim. You can't try to catch the fish. Even though it's like in an enclosed area, you're not allowed to do that seder. The question is, why not? The fish would be delicious. I go take my Chilean sea bass right out of the trough, and I stick it in the frying pan. I cook it, chas v'shalom, I don't overcook it, and it's delicious. That's wonderful. If I take it the previous day, it's not going to be as fresh. So what would be wrong? Well, what would be wrong about doing that? The Mishnah says you're not allowed to do it, but why not? So Rashi writes, "Ein sadin dogim, av agav the shchita va'afia ubishul me avos malachos hein v'hutru l'tzorach Yom Tov." Even though you're allowed to shecht on Yom Tov, you're allowed to bake, you're allowed to cook, even though those are avos malachos, and you're allowed to do them for Yom Tov. So Rashi says, "Taima mishum ti efshem erev Yom Tov." The shchita, that's only because you can't do from erev Yom Tov. If you do shchita, chayish lemichmar bisra, the meat is gonna get hot. Pen yischam b'yasriach, it's gonna spoil. Aval tzeda efshel etzudo mibod yom, you can catch the fish from the big aquarium from before Yom Tov. V'yinichenu b'mitzudasa b'mayim, leave it in the water so it doesn't die, but you keep it in your net so you don't need to do tzeda the next day. V'lo yamus u'lamachar yitleim. So Rashi says that if you can do Meleches Ochel Nefesh from before Yom Tov, and there's no downside to doing it, then you're not allowed to do it on Yom Tov. That's what Rashi says. He doesn't explain whether this is a Torah prohibition or not. It seems to be a machlokus on how to understand Rashi, but Rashi just gives you the principle without the original source. The Rambam is the most explicit Rishon, adopting a particular position similar to Rashi, and the Rambam assumes that any Meleches Ochel Nefesh may be done on Yom Tov midda oraisa, and anything that you see that is prohibited to do on Yom Tov is only prohibited midrabanan if you can make food with it. So the Rambam says in Halacha Hey, under the next source, the Rambam writes, "Kol malacha she'efshar lar le'asos me'erev Yom Tov, v'lo yeh bo hefsei v'lo chisaron, im naseis mi ba'erev, any malacha which you could have done from erev Yom Tov and it doesn't have any downsides, asru chachamim lasos osa b'Yom Tov, afal pi shehi letzorach achila." The Chachamim prohibited doing it on Yom Tov, even though it's Ochel Nefesh. It's for the purposes of eating. Why? The Rambam says, "V'lama asru davar zeh, gezeira shema yaniach adam malacho she'efshel asosim erev Yom Tov liYom Tov." You know what? I can do all the stuff on Yom Tov. I don't need to prepare an Erev Yom Tov. Erev Yom Tov, I'll go to the amusement park. I'll go on a long hike. I'll get back an hour before Yom Tov. And all the food I want to make, I'll make on Yom Tov. I'll spend 10 hours preparing on Yom Tov. And right at the end of Yom Tov, I spent the whole day preparing, and now I'll eat the food. So the Rambam says, "V'nimsa Yom Tov kulo holech basiyos osa melachos." I'm going to spend all day preparing. V'yimona misimchas Yom Tov v'lo yela panai lechal lishtos. It's going to ruin the spirit of Yom Tov. And therefore, the Rambam says, Ketzad, what can't you do? Ein kotzrin, you can't cut stuff from the ground. V'lo dashin, you can't thresh. V'lo zorin, v'lo borin, v'lo tochen esachitim. You can't go through all the stages of the malachos of preparing wheat. V'lo maraktin, you can't sift it. Shekol elu v'chayotze bahem. Efshar la'asosan me'erev Yom Tov. V'ein b'kach hefsei v'lo chisaron. All these malachos, from harvesting the wheat until turning it into flour, can be done from before Yom Tov, and there's no real loss involved, and therefore the Chachamim prohibited it. Avol, the Rambam says, and halacha ches, loshin ve'ofin v'shochten umavashlim b'yom tov, shem asu ela mi ba'erev yesh b'kach hefsed o chisaron tam. She'ein lechem cham o tavshil shebi shalayom kelechem shenefa me'emesh uchetz tavshil nishbas me'emesh. Fresh bread that I cooked today, that I cooked an hour ago, is totally incomparable to the bread that I cooked yesterday. So if I bake the bread, if you say I have to bake the bread on Erev Yom Tov, then it's not going to taste as good. So the Rambam says that's why it's permitted. And the same thing he says is true with meat. That's what the Rambam says. Okay. Now, this is one position in Rishonim. This is the position of the Rambam, maybe the position of Rashi. It also probably is the majority opinion of Rishonim. There is, however, a very, very different take on this particular issue. By the way, it's also the Tosfos we saw on Shabbos. Tosfos who says that you're not allowed to build your house on Yom Tov, to rebuild it, only because of Uvda Dechol. But Tosfos assumes there you're allowed to make cheese on Yom Tov. Bona is permitted. And at least midoraisa, maybe not midorabanan. But it's only in Issa Rabbanan. However, there is another position found in Tosfos and Beitza, and in the Ramban as well, who have a totally different take on the issue. So the Tosfos and Beitza says the following: Ach tema, my shema, the bottom of the second sheet. My shema yala v'yitlosh. Why is there a gzera against eating the egg that you might come to pluck a fruit off the tree? Ha'afilu lechatchila mutar litlosh to ha'ochel nefesh mutar. Ochel nefesh is permitted on Yom Tov. Why can't I pick the apples off the tree? The gam kasha lekamon. Also later in the third parak, Tanan, ein sudden dagan maybe barim b'Yom Tov. You can't hunt the fish. V'amai ha'ochel nefeshu. And then Tosfos in the next couple of lines rejects Rashi's suggestion, and what's the Rambam's suggestion, that ochel nefesh, which can be done from before Yom Tov, may not be done in Yom Tov. What Tosfos points out, I'm not going to read it inside. There's a machlokas hatanoim in the Mishnah and Beitza, Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Am I allowed to do machshirei ochel nefesh on Yom Tov? Not malacha for preparing the food itself, but let's say my knife has gotten, let's say I have a dull knife, and in order to do shchita, in order to properly chop my vegetables, I need to sharpen the knife. That's called machshirei ochel nefesh. It's not ochel nefesh. Ochel nefesh is when I operate on the food, but that's called machshirei ochel nefesh. So there's a machlokas there. The Chachamim say machshirei ochel nefesh are categorically prohibited on Yom Tov. Rabbi Yehuda says that machshirei ochel nefesh that I could not do before Yom Tov, I may do on Yom Tov. So for example, if I had a sharp knife before Yom Tov, but in the course of cutting over Yom Tov, it got dull and I need to sharpen it, Rabbi Yehuda says, since I couldn't do that from before Yom Tov, I may do that on Yom Tov. It's not clear how we paskin, but what Tosfos says is that it's clear from there that the only time we make a distinction by a malacha between something you could have done from before Yom Tov versus something that you could only have done on Yom Tov is by preparatory steps, by machshirei ochel nefesh. There, Rabbi Yehuda only permits machshirei ochel nefesh that could have been done or that couldn't have been done before Yom Tov. But by ochel nefesh, Tosfos says there is no distinction whatsoever whether you could have done the food before Yom Tov or you couldn't. It is mutar on Yom Tov. So Tosfos, on the second line, on the third page of the source sheets, Tosfos first quotes a suggestion he rejects out of hand. V'yesh omrim delekach ein sadim shema yotzu dagim tmeim she'enam tzara. Now, you know why you're not allowed to hunt fish on Yom Tov? Because you might catch a non-kosher fish. Tosfos doesn't like that. Velona here, and he explains why. Therefore, you go to the third line. Al kain perish rabbeinu nisano mikinon. The biyushalmi yesh ach asher yochel ufon nefesh. So the Yerushalmi, which I don't think we're going to have the time to look at, which is actually somewhat controversial what it actually means. The Yerushalmi says, at least according to some opinions, that the Torah says, on the one hand, you may do melachos for the purpose of food, ach asher yachal nefesh, but ushmarta mesamatzos. And when do you really have to watch the matzos that they don't become chametz? When you put the water into the flour, when the possibility of becoming chametz happens. Now, what malacha is it when you put the water into the flour? That's lisha. That's one of the last steps. It's right before you bake the bread. So the Yerushalmi says, Shemishimor osam malachos shemishimor ve'elach, namely only kneading the dough and baking it. Hey mutaros tahainu milisha ve'elach. Aval shar malachos temikodem lachein asurim. Any malachos from before lisha in the process of making bread, starting with planting the wheat, all the way down to sifting the flour, up until that point are prohibited mid oraisa. And then the Yerushalmi has another source. So Tosas doesn't really explain sort of conceptually. He just quotes Yerushalmi that says, only malachos that are permitted are milisha ve'elech, from kneading the dough and onward. There is one problem, however, with so Tosas assumes, based upon the Yerushalmi, that there's an isur d'oraisa of doing certain malachos on Yom Tov, even if they are for the purposes of food, even if they are ochel nefesh. Meaning malachos that are very early in the stage of food preparation are not permitted. But the Tosfos, the Yerushalmi, has drushos, but the logic to it is not necessarily presented, and Tosfos doesn't elaborate. However, the Ramban, in his genius in the Muchamos, lays out really the conceptual position. And I want to just highlight one problem that the Ramban will grapple with. And it's really a crucial question. It's really a crucial issue that Tosas doesn't discuss. One of the malachos, there are 11 malachos for making bread, from the time you plant the wheat until you bake the bread. It's called, the Gemara in Shabbos calls it Sidura de Pas, the order malachos in making bread. One of the malachos, which is like number 7 or 8 or something like that, is borer, when you pull out the pebbles from the pile of wheat kernels. Now, is borer permitted on Yom Tov? And the answer is, if you look at the Mishnah in Beitza, there's a debate between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but the simple reading is, at least Beis Hillel permits doing certain kinds of borer that are prohibited mid-oraisa on Shabbos, meaning you're allowed to do them on Yom Tov. Sometimes you may have to make a little shinoi, but it's still a malacha d'oraisa. So the question for the Yerushalmi or for Tosfos is, how can borer be permitted in some cases on Yom Tov? You're not allowed to actually be borer the pile of wheat, but on your sometimes food that you might be making in the kitchen, you might be allowed to do borer. Why are you allowed to do borer if only from lisha and onward is permitted min haTorah? So the Ramban writes, and I'm only going to read little snippets here. The Ramban writes, and this is from the Milchamos Hashem, is Milchamos on the Rif in Beitza, on the source sheet, the third source sheet. The Ramban has first quoted Rashi and rejects Rashi, and he's assuming, I think, according to Rashi, probably it's only midrabanan. And now the Ramban says, if you look at the first, I'm going to focus on the underlined portions mostly, but the first underlined portions. The Ramban says, Elahevu yodim shelo kol hamalachos hutru b'yom tov, ela hechsher hama'acholim le'ochlon kigon afia ubishol v'chayotze behem. Not all malachos ochel nefesh are permitted min haTorah on Yom Tov. Only the malachos that are preparing the food to be eaten, which might mean final stage, like baking and like cooking and similar things. Avol lotzud balei chayim she'enam b'rshus adam, to hunt creatures that are not right now in our control. V'chein lakor davar megidulo, to uproot something that's growing from the ground. Kigon kitzira v'toldoseha, harvesting in all its sub malachos. Elu v'chayotze bahem asurin v'hem b'chlal melechas avoda. The Ramban strikes again. What he commented on Chumash, that the Torah distinguishes between melechas avoda and melechas ochel nefesh, the Ramban says that there are many melachos that are involved in the preparation of food that don't fall under the category melechas ochel nefesh. They're actually in melechas avoda. And then he goes on to quote the Yerushalmi. But the question is for the Ramban, what is the criteria? How do you decide which melachos of ochel nefesh are in the category of melechas avoda, and which of them are actually called ochel nefesh and are permitted? So if you skip down to about 5 lines from the bottom of the Ramban, where I underlined, the Ramban explains Actually, go to the previous line. So he says, Shaloi Tira, where I underlined Aval Elu Tikun Hain. Go to the previous line. The Ramban says, Shaloi Tira Torah B'Yom Tov Ela Melachos Shel Yoman. Melachos that are typically done for that day. Kigon, Shchita, Afia, and Bishul. Shechting an animal, baking and cooking. Aval Elu, these melachos, like harvesting, like grinding up the grain, like sifting the grain, tikun hein b'derech b'nei adam l'sakin mehem liyamin harbe. This is something which you do in bulk. So the Ramban distinguishes between a malacha that's typically done in small amounts, because you do it for that day, and malachos that are done in bulk. So Amra Torah, yisakin kedarka mechol liyom tov, shelo yisakin miyom tov liyamim harbe shalchol. So the Ramban says the basic distinction in HaTorah is between malachos that are done normally for a daily purpose versus malachos that are done in bulk for many days. To allow them on Yom Tov, in effect, would mean that you're doing malach on Yom Tov for Yom Tov and for 10 days and for the next 10 days. That's prohibited min HaTorah. Now, I mentioned to you before, the one prominent question for Tosfos is, what do you do with the fact that you're allowed to do certain kinds of borah on Yom Tov? Or a better example, you're allowed to grind spices on Yom Tov if you don't use a special grinder. You can grind pepper, but you can't use the pepper mill. That's an Isser Midrabanan. But if you take some other kind of grinder, a mortar and a pestle, you're allowed to grind pepper on Yom Tov. It's tochein. Tochein is before Lisha in the list. Why is it allowed? So the Ramban says, V'afal pi shemotzinu heter b'malachos halalu, tochen and esa pilpulin berechaim shelahem v'cholani dochen kedarkon nami tchinahi. Any of the spices we allow grinding in whatever way are all malacha that's before Lisha. And he gives other examples of borer. He says hanu in the underlined part, malachos de yom nidhu. You know what? Some malachos are always done in bulk. You plant in bulk. You never plant for that day. You harvest wheat in bulk. You don't harvest for that day. But some malachos like bishul and afia are almost always done just daily. But some malachos are dual use. Certain kinds of borer, certain kinds of tochein are done in bulk, and certain kinds of borer and tochein are done for daily purposes. So the Ramban says grinding spices is normally done when you need it, not in bulk. Grinding wheat is done in bulk. Umikol makom nismata ksira v'toldosea kigon tolesh peros hanachalim shelo hitira Torah lo hachshe ochlen shebershuso avolakor davar migidulo lo avafilu leperos hanifgamim miyom lachavera. So the Ramban actually says two things here. When the Ramban is quoted, they often don't quote this. The Ramban says there are two things that will make Meleches Ochel Nefesh to be actually Meleches Avoda not permitted. Number one, if it's done in bulk, typically. If it's done in bulk, even though sometimes it would qualify as Meleches Ochel Nefesh, you're not allowed to do it. It's prohibited in that Torah. Number two, and I don't have time to talk about this, but it's an incredibly novel point of the Ramban. And for those of you who are into the Lumdus, it might be a source midaraisa for muksa. The Ramban says that to take something that's not in your domain, either to hunt an animal which is not in your possession, or to harvest something still attached to the ground that is not considered, even though you might own it, it's not considered b'shusa shel adam. The Ramban says that is definitionally meleches avoda. Okay, so we don't have time for the Yerushalmi. But I want to sort of just summarize and talk for a moment about the Psak of the Shulchan Aruch and present why this could actually matter significantly today. Most of the dinim, everybody agrees upon, regardless of which position you take. We've seen two positions. We know that the Mishnayos and the Gemara prohibit many kinds of malacha done on Yom Tov, even though they're done for the preparation of food. Why? So there are two basic positions in the Rishonim. The position of the Rambam and probably Rashi is that even though all malachos are permitted min haTorah for the preparation of food that you can eat on Yom Tov, the Rabbanan prohibited many, if not all, things that could have been done from Erev Yom Tov if they don't degrade when you do them from the previous day, because they don't want you to ruin the spirit of Yom Tov. Only malachos of Ochel Nefesh that you couldn't do the day before without some type of degradation did the Chachamim allow still to be done on Yom Tov. But anything that's prohibited for Ochel Nefesh, the Rambam and probably Rashi would say it's only a D'Rabbanan prohibition. The Ramban's position and Tosas and Beitza's position is that no, is that there's a whole category of various kinds of Ochel Nefesh food preparation, which is actually not permitted min Torah, and it's treated as Melechas Avoda. And the way the Ramban formulates it, the popular quotation is Melacha that's done in bulk typically is still called Melechas Avoda, even though it's for the preparation of food. And the Ramban goes further and says even actions on food that's not in your reshus is also considered Melechas Avoda. That's why you can't pluck an apple off the tree, because taking something that's attached to the ground is not yet in your domain. It's definitionally Meleches Avoda, not Meleches Ochel Nefesh. How do we paskin? So the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam's language, and which is the position of one Tosas and Shabbos. It's the position of the Rush. It's the position of many Rishonim. That all Meleches Ochel Nefesh is Gzeira mid Rabbanan. The Rabbanan prohibited A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. You're not allowed to do that on Yom Tov. The Mishnah Berurah notes that there are many Rishonim who disagree with that and say that it's a Torah prohibition. And I'll close by pointing out one perhaps practical difference bisman hazeh. There's one malacha in particular which I would argue that according to the Rambam remains permitted, because even though had the Chachamim been around today, they probably would have prohibited it, but they didn't. They never made Gzeira D'Rabbanan, and we can't make Gzeiras D'Rabbanan. And that is the malacha of shchita. In the time of the Gemara, when they had no refrigeration, so you generally shechted right before you were going to eat. Meat that you had shechted already the day before was probably going to spoil. I mean, unless you preserved it, yes, you salted it heavily or something like that. So I would argue that according to the Rambam, and today shchita has become a little more popular. I have any number of students in the course of my time, and I've taught in YU, who, not from me, but have learned to do shchita on chickens at least, or something like that. I would argue, according to the position of the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, the shchita was permitted in the time of the Gemara because the Chachamim never prohibited it. And since they never prohibited it, that malacha remains permitted even today. However, according to the Ramban, Bisman HaGemara, shchita was permitted because it was a malacha nases liyoman. It was a malacha that you typically did when you need it. But since it's not Gzeira D'Rabbanan, it's just a din d'oraisa whose definition is dependent upon societal realia. So today, I think according to the Ramban, since the bulk of shchita in our society is done in bulk, it's done in it's done, in shlocht houses somewhere in the Midwest, and it's done in large quantities, and you don't shech the day you need it, and instead you buy the meat, you stick it in your refrigerator, you cook it when you want to cook it. I would argue that today, according to the Ramban, shchita has become a malacha that's no longer Melechas Ochel Nefesh, but is actually Melechas Avoda. So we could debate that particular issue, but nonetheless, this really is as the core machlokas harishonim. We know that there's a list of things on Melechas Ochel that's done for the purposes of food, which is not permitted on Yom Tov, and it's a basic machlokas harishonim, whether that stems from a rabbinic gezerah, not to ruin the spirit of Yom Tov, to do anything that you could do from before Yom Tov without it degrading to do it before Yom Tov, or in fact, is there a whole category of malacha that one is not allowed to do midorais on Yom Tov, even though it's for the preparation of food. I want to take this opportunity to wish everybody a Chag Sameach. I hope that all of you are healthy and remain safe. You have a good Yom Tov, and that hopefully sooner rather than later, all of us, maybe not together, we don't live in the same communities, but can share the same makom of tefillah and the same makom of Torah, so we can teach in person rather than teaching over Zoom. Thank God for Zoom, because without it, we wouldn't have anything. But I look forward to the opportunity to be in person and to share Divrei Torah face to face. B'mehei Rav Yameinu.